Today, we're going to be talking about defending the family with our guest, Victoria Cobb, president of the Family Foundation. Stay tuned.
You don't want to miss it. You're listening to Marriage Mania, where we are audacious, sagacious, and tenacious for the Lord to uphold godly marriages and to raise fervent children who are countercultural and stand for biblical truth.
Hi, welcome back. I'm Tanya.
And I'm Michael.
And today we're going to be talking about defending the family with our guest, Victoria Cobb, president of the Family Foundation. So before we get started, please subscribe here. It really helps us to get the message out. We really want to be able to reach as many families as possible. We want to be able to share Jesus with them and really focus on marriage and family. So let's get started. I'm going to introduce you to our guest today. Her name is Victoria Cobb. She's the president of the Family Foundation. The Family Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan, faith-based organization that defends family values. And so I am so excited to introduce our guest. And so let's get started. Hi, Victoria. I'm so glad that you're here. I am so excited to be able to talk to you today about so many things to defend the family. But before we get started, I just want to introduce how we actually met. And we met many, many years ago. We attended church together, and your daughter has been such an influence to our daughter. And it's just been such a great journey. And I'm just so happy and thrilled that I'm connected to your family. And today we're going to be talking about some things, how we defend the family. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization?
Yeah, so I'm a mom, as you mentioned. I'm married with 4 kids. That's kind of the most important part of my life.
Yes.
And so we've got sort of everything from elementary to heading off to college in the end of the summer. So that's kind of our zone, couple of girls, couple of boys. And the other part of my life is I run an organization called the Family Foundation. And for folks that might be familiar with Focus on the Family, that's kind of the easiest way to think of us, is that we are associated with them. All the issues you hear those folks kind of talking about, marriage, life, religious freedom, parenting, all those things are things that we work on, but we do it in the public policy space. So not so much the direct ministry, but more how do we ensure that our laws and our school boards and all the things that kind of govern our lives actually honor the principles that God has put out for the family in scripture. So, so and we do it in Virginia. So just at the state level, state and local, I should say. We also find ourselves in school boards and other kinds of things, but yeah, so that's kind of about me. And I just felt called very early on, particularly to the pro-life issue. That was the issue that God used to bring me into this. We do a lot more than that, but that was the burden that was on my heart. And so I've been with this organization now 24 years.
That's amazing, Victoria. Yeah. I mean, it's so wonderful that you defend the unborn. And so we are very excited about that, and teaching our daughter too, to be able to do that, because she just has a passion for that, for little babies.
I just want to say that we just have a champion of the kingdom here. I mean,
Yes.
Victoria Cobb, you and the Family Foundation are just holding the line against liberal paganism in the culture and in the government that is just attacking the family from every angle. And you're fighting for a government that supports the family by informing and mobilizing the church, God's people, to get involved. We just love what you're doing. You and the Family Foundation do so much. You have like initiatives to help church leaders connect with government leaders. You have the Founding Freedoms Law Center to defend individuals and institutions who are having their fundamental religious rights, parental rights, and free speech rights threatened. You have initiatives to engage voters to get out the vote. You have report cards on representatives of the Virginia General Assembly on how they vote in regards to supporting the family. You address the issues of parental rights, abortion, LGBT, diversity, equity, and inclusion, woke policies, cancel culture, religious freedom, freedom of speech, human exploitation, anything that threatens.
You're making me tired. You're making me think we
do
I
so
should
much.
Be exhausted. No,
anything that threatens
do
our
a lot of
religious
things.
liberty in the family. I mean, you have a Worldview Academy for kids and parents, and you have a podcast that keeps us all informed of what is going on in the state of Virginia and the nation in regard to these issues. Just we just want to thank you so much for the work
Yeah,
that you're doing.
thank you.
It's so needed. And we wanted to give our listeners an introduction to the Family Foundation and some of the issues that you address in your organization and in your podcast. So if we could do a rather rapid fire question answer survey through a bunch of these issues, and we'll refer people to your website and podcast to learn more. But first of all, the Kansas City Chiefs kicker, Harrison Butker, we wanted to talk about him for a moment. You talked about him in your podcast recently, and he's been all over the news and social media lately when he promoted traditional family values at a commencement address at a Catholic university. For those who haven't heard, tell us what he did and what the fallout has been.
Yeah, this was quite something. He was asked to be a commencement speaker at a Catholic university. And you know what he did? He dared to say Catholic-like things, like family matters. And so he addressed a number of things in his speech. And he mentioned things like, he talked about pride, and he just sort of, as an offhanded comment, said, not the kind that has a month devoted to it, not the deadly sin kind, so he was referring to things that, the Catholic Church and we as believers think God, does not affirm.
Mm-hmm.
And, but he went on, and I think the thing that apparently really upset the media, which you never know what's going to upset them the most, but what really captured everybody's attention was he dared to say that for the women in the audience, they may go on to have careers and so forth, but they may are likely to sort of hold up motherhood as sort of their greatest occupation in life. And he honored his wife in this beautiful way where he just simply said, look, I couldn't be what I am without her leaning into her vocation, which is upholding their home, is keeping their family together. And so it was really quite a beautiful, it's amazing to me that something so beautiful could be taken so the wrong way by the left-wing kind of establishment. But he upset the apple cart because, truly the narrative is, you have to be career focused. Family has to fit in perfectly, in a box, exactly where it might kind of complement what you're already doing in your well-established life. It isn't seen anymore as the cornerstone, as the bedrock for everything else you do. It used to be, that's the foundation, you marriage, family, and then you build out of that the rest of your life. And now in the secular world, I think we just see that it's expected that women are to pursue careers and sort of climb whatever that corporate ladder is, and be careful how family fits in, right? That's and I think it's important to understand that narrative is on purpose. It's because those things fuel things like the abortion industry. The reality is encouraging women to be childless is a profit driver for things like abortion. So it's really sad because I think anybody who's a mom knows how wonderful it is, and that it is so much the centerpiece of your life once that happens. And so for him to say that wasn't saying something that most women don't know. But I think it had to be sort of struck down by the left. And I think, if a Catholic priest had walked in and said the same thing, it would have not made waves. The reason it made waves is we can't have celebrities out there saying these things because people might actually hear it and they might actually follow it. It's okay for it to come out of doctrine, but it can't come out of pop culture.
Right. It's very influential, right? And it does stir people up because the role of a wife at home, it's a lot of work. It really is, you're taking care of your children and you're doing all this. You're actually discipling them. If you're a Christian, you're discipling them in the Lord. So I think that's an amazing role to have. But some people are called into careers, but also have families. So I love that.
Yeah, I commend Harrison Butker because he was brave. You can get canceled, no matter who you are, they'll take you out. And he spoke about those who are pushing dangerous gender ideologies. He spoke against the Pride Month. He spoke up for family values, and he spoke against the liberal agenda. And the liberals are throwing a fit. They're still throwing a fit.
They had a petition running trying to get him moved off the team. I was proud of the Chiefs for standing up. The leadership seems to be fine with him and be behind him. But the NFL has always been a little bit left. I shouldn't say always, but of late, they haven't really been the most sort of straight down the middle sports organization. And so, I hope we're, as believers, standing behind him and encouraging people to support these folks when they get out there. It takes courage to say anything against what the sort of flow is right now. And I just hope that we're sort of out there sort of echoing, saying, look, this is reality. This is true. This is good. This is beautiful. And we're proud of him for saying it.
Yes.
Yeah. And especially speaking up for traditional family values. And, like you said, the most controversial thing you said was that career women would probably be more excited about getting married and having children. I was like, well, what's wrong with family being our top priority? Yeah. I like what radio talk show host Abraham Hamilton III says every day on American Family Radio at his 6 o'clock airing when people are probably listening to him on their commute home from work. He says, right now you are probably leaving your part-time job where you generate an income and will be transitioning home to your full-time job where you will cultivate an outcome. I love that.
That is a great statement.
Yeah, because it reminds everybody coming home what your true priority is. And, the family should be all of our top priorities. It's the center of the health of any society. And I heard you, Victoria, one time quote Mother Teresa, who said, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. The family is the center of God's creation, the first institution he created, marital oneness between a man and a woman. Harrison Butker stood up for that, and he received a standing ovation because he was speaking to, as you said, a Catholic university with similar values. There are those that want him canceled for speaking his Christian views at a Christian college. I can't get over that. You can't even speak your mind in your own venues. Where is the free speech? And I love your podcast.
That's the thing. It used to be the case that it was problematic they didn't want us to share our faith anywhere in secular places, but really they just don't want it out there at all because it really kind of disrupts the where people, the left wants to be, which is in a place where the most important thing is you and what you want and what you need and your ascendancy in society. And so it's super sad. But we've gotten to the point where, yes, even Christian things inside a Christian setting is now controversial.
Crazy. And we love your podcast on what are the things you can say at a commencement address that will get you canceled. I think you had this podcast before Harrison Butker. And it was a bit
2
prophetic.
weeks ahead of time. Yeah. And I think he hit every one of them. And I told somebody, I did some interview, I just laughed because I would have never guessed that it was going to be a male that commented on women, their place in the home and that kind of thing, that we when we said it and when we predicted the top things that could get you canceled, we said something on lines of, saying that you might want to be a mom, like, a commencement speaker, like a student saying, like, I'm looking forward to, lots of things, but I want to go be a mom. We thought that's how it would roll out. But no, it was a professional football player. Right.
I think, you can't say Jesus, can't pray in Jesus' name, say something anti-gender, and, oh, wow, just watch out. You're just going to create a firestorm. And, of course, promote being a mom, and that's like the same thing, standing up for the Bible in any way. Where's the free speech? What are the rights that students and guest speakers have at commencement addresses or valedictorian addresses and such?
Yeah, this often really gets confused. I think there's been such confusion over, first of all, this idea of separation of church and state, which we could go hours of why that's not what people think it is. And no, it is not etched in our Constitution and all of the things that people are confused about around that. But really where the law stands is just simply that when you are a government official, that in your capacity as a government official, so that could, and this kind of applies to people who work for the government, so it goes all the way down into public schools, you should not necessarily put forward your faith as a, you're not trying to evangelize in your role as a government official, because the government is not supposed to establish one singular religion, right? But that's it. That's the narrowness of it. But where people get confused is they think it can't happen. Faith can't exist within the walls of anything that is remotely sort of public. And that is just not the case. In particular, students, you have a right to your faith. You have a right to express your faith. You are not speaking on behalf of the government. You can say, legally, you should be able to say anything you want. Now, schools may request you not say as much because they might not want to offend their audience. But the reality is, if you've been selected as a speaker, there's a reason. And you can share what you want to share. And usually faith is a lot of what has made many young Christian kids be able to be their valedictorian. It's actually their faith that's made people like them, and that's why they're getting requested to be the student speaker. So it's perfectly acceptable to say, that you give this honor and glory to Jesus and all those things. And when you're a commencement speaker coming in, you want to be respectful of what they've asked of you, right? So that's I think that's Christian charity, right? Like, you want to be, but the bottom line is that is who you are. And you absolutely can share that. You're not speaking on behalf of the government. You are a guest entering into that space. We hold our rights. We don't release them. And even when you're a public school teacher, that doesn't mean you can't have your faith. It still means that anytime there's sort of an opportunity where a student wants to ask you about your faith, you can share that as they've asked. It also means, people have this kind of weird notion about Bibles in schools and, I can't have my Bible out on my desk. Sure you can. And we've had some great U.S. Supreme Court decisions lately that are really starting to uphold religious freedom, and I think are confirming what we've known all along. But I think we even have more sort of basis now to say, no, there's a very safe space. Many people are aware of the Coach Kennedy case. And that has lots of implication, even to graduation addresses. So that was the football coach that was praying with his team, and he was ultimately vindicated by the Supreme Court. And that's an example of, was he in an official capacity? How was he praying? So that came out on his side, and that sort of sends reverberations even into graduation ceremonies of yes, we absolutely can share our faith in an appropriate way. And certainly in Butker's case, we were in a Christian college, as we need to mention.
Yeah, and I think that's important to point out, that students and guest speakers are not government officials, and they have free speech rights like the rest of us to state their views. There's no establishment of religious implications in this regard. You hear about Christian clubs that aren't allowed to meet when they allow other clubs, or churches that can't hold an Easter sunrise service at a park when they allow other gatherings. I know my church growing up had an Easter sunrise service every Sunday with a big cross that they would put up next to the river. And one year the park said that the cross wasn't allowed anymore to be displayed because someone complained. I mean, these policies are blatantly unconstitutional. We need to challenge them. Don't let them stand. It goes against general fairness and free speech rights. These are traditional public forums, and the government would need a compelling governmental interest, which is a high standard, to prevent someone from engaging in their constitutional rights. And they would have to apply that to everyone, not just to speech they don't like it, but
exactly.
The people will violate your rights left and right if you don't stand up for them. We need to be bold and brave and stand with others who are standing up in order to empower all of us to keep the line and to keep these inroads into our rights and religious freedom, so we have the freedom to spread the gospel. There's a lot of schools that seem to be the center of liberalism and promoting liberal anti-family ideology. You got the diversity, equity, and inclusion policies seem to be at the center of all this. What's the problem with diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, DEI policies?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that sounds so good, right? This is the hard part about this. Like, the idea that we want to love everyone and want to respect everyone and make sure everyone's included. It sounds so good, but how it plays out, what's actually behind it, unfortunately, harms the very thing that it's trying to help. And that is that instead of making sure that we have opportunities for everyone, what we're trying to do is rig outcomes so that we make sure that regardless of somebody's ability or their capabilities, we're going to elevate someone because of what their demographics are. So we're going to say, we want to make sure that this position is held by somebody that is, usually it's somebody that is not a white Caucasian, for example. And that's great that you want to make sure those voices of all folks are included. But the reality is, you should want the person who is best for the job, right? Like, you should want who is going to be the most skilled. And so you want to make sure it's very open, that everybody feels comfortable applying, that you have the best process to make sure that you're reaching out to people of all ethnicities, for example. But you want to make sure you actually hire, so the outcome is actually whoever is best for the job, because you want that to move forward. Well, what we've done is we've included DEI, this idea of equity rather than sort of equal opportunities. We've put this into so many spaces, and it goes everywhere from corporate to college. And in the corporate world, what this can mean is that you get people who are literally unqualified for the jobs that they hold. That ultimately has become kind of a scary situation in certain things. You really want the pilot of your airplane to know how to fly an airplane, regardless of their skin color, right? Like, if you're sitting in that passenger seat, you want the most qualified person behind the wheel.
Right.
This is just a silly example, but and there are corporations that are starting to realize that they have done themselves harm by following this ideology, and are starting to back away, which is encouraging. Then you move over to college campuses, and that is a whole nother thing. And really, it's kind of, what are we teaching about this? And how is this infiltrating every area of space? And so colleges have entire divisions, entire departments, people that are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for their job, which is to basically make sure that there is X percentage of different kinds of races included in all the different, whether it's faculty or the student body themselves or whatever it might be. And this becomes their full-time job, is to sort of inculcate this idea everywhere. And unfortunately, what ends up happening when it plays out in the classroom, when we're teaching kids, which there are literally classes about this, and kids are, and we've discovered in Virginia that in some colleges you're actually required to take them, which is just stunning. So we're working on peeling that back out of our state schools. But the reality is, when you teach that, you end up teaching a philosophy that there's sort of an oppressor and an oppressed, that there are sort of good races to come out of, or you could be part of a race that has a bad history. Well, no question that racism is a real issue in America and around the world, and has been throughout history. And as believers, we want to absolutely hit that head on. But what they're teaching is this idea that just by the very nature of your skin color, you might be an oppressor. And so we find that kids walk out, and instead of feeling more unified with everyone around them, everybody feels more actually divided, more in their own box, more separated. And it actually sort of engenders the wrong kind of feelings, rather than building the love and respect for all that we want everyone to have. And so it's just, the way it plays out is really poor, and it has not served us well, either in the corporate setting where it's pushed very hard, or as we're trying to literally teach this as a doctrine through our state colleges.
And Virginia leads the nation, right, with the largest funding of DEI?
Yeah, UVA got tagged as just unbelievable amounts of money being put into this. I think it was something like $20 million. And then VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, they had required classes. Oddly, George Mason did, and I typically have thought of George Mason as a pretty conservative public school as they come, but they had some. And so thankfully our governor is trying to get at this and has kind of unmasked that this is going on. And one school has completely cut off the requirement. One school is temporarily suspending it and re-looking at it. We hope that means they're going to ultimately bag these classes. But we got to be really careful when we're teaching differences rather than teaching unity and respect. We deal with this also in legislation. For example, Virginia had a bill put forward this year about bullying. And this is an example. We all know bullying is terrible and can truly harm a young child. And we want to do everything and have the strongest possible policies against bullying. But the reason a child is bullied, there are a million reasons children are bullied. And so they tried to create a bill that basically said bullying is more wrong if it's done because and it was an LGBT related bill. Like, it's more wrong if you're one of these classes of people that think they're, a different sexuality or something. Well, no, bullying's always wrong. Even if a child is bullied because they have red hair and glasses, that bullying is terrible for that child. But they try to kind of make it be about intersectionality, is what they call it. Like, how do you come to the table as a female, or as a homosexual, or as a person of a minority class of, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And so all that to say, we as Christians want to stand on God loves everyone. He made everyone. His image is stamped, into everyone. And for that reason, and that reason alone, we want to do everything we can to respect everyone, to give them every opportunity to help human flourishing. But we want to be about unity and togetherness and bringing people along, not sort of a false system of diversity that isn't true getting people to the true point of understanding so that we can actually eradicate some of the racism that comes with human frailty and sin.
Right. Race is definitely, it's always been an issue, will always be an
Always.
issue ever since Babel.
Sin.
Right. It's sin, but our DEI policies going in the right direction, putting race and ethnicity and classes of people at the forefront of selecting people for things. It's not merit-based. It's preferring certain races over another. It has at its core the socialistic woke notions of oppressors and the oppressed, as you said. It promotes divisiveness. And it's a strong indication of a school having a liberal agenda and recruiting liberals to work there. In a school you might want to avoid if you're looking for a Bible-centered education instead of a Bible-attacking education, which you will get at a liberal school. Your faith, your biblical values will be attacked and ridiculed, and you'll be vastly outnumbered if you're one of the few who stand up for the Bible. I must say, I get kind of riled up here, but I must say, as a Bible-believing parent, I would highly recommend encouraging kids to go to a strong Bible-believing college with a biblical culture. And for us, we're encouraging our child right already as an 8-year-old to go to a college online. Many colleges, professors, and students, the culture there is just too liberal and anti-Christian and getting worse. And too many kids are walking away from the faith in college or having their faith seriously undermined. And not too many kids are equipped to handle that environment, if any of us are, and keep our faith intact. If your child is going off to college, especially a non-biblically oriented one, make sure they are prepared with a strong biblical foundation in apologetics, defending the faith. Encourage them to join or start a strong Christian Bible-believing club. They need to do things to help keep their faith intact. Tell us about DEI classes being required. You alluded to that, or almost required for graduation. Where is the status with that in the colleges of Virginia?
So we're still getting to the bottom of all the different state schools in Virginia, but VCU was really an example of a really terrible one where they had sort of a list of classes that you could choose from that were all sort of in this category. So there was like several of these classes, and they might be on intersectionality, or they were on sexuality. Actually, one of them was related to sexuality, but they had these this little list of classes, and you had to take 2 of them before you could graduate. They were graduation requirements. And so thankfully, our governor stepped in and kind of revealed this to the public, and the Board of Visitors, which is the governing body over top of state universities in Virginia, their Board of Visitors actually voted to completely remove this requirement. So we're actually making good progress.
That's great.
But I do think, to your point, people have to have a strong foundation to have to go into a college like that. And especially if you're going to be required to take some of these classes. And this stuff, unfortunately, seeps into other classes, right? I think there's an old notion that you could avoid these kind of ideas based on picking certain classes. Or in K-12 settings, we used to think, oh, we can, opt our child out of family life education, which is Virginia's version of sex ed, and we can avoid a lot of that kind of ideology. Well, the reality is it's interfering in every class. It is literally an agenda that now we've literally had, people come through these colleges, be trained in this stuff, go on to teaching professions, and now they're in our K-12 classrooms. They might be teaching social science or math or whatever, but they're bringing this stuff into the classroom and putting it on our kids. And so it is much harder to be in any public setting, public K-12 or college, and not constantly be infused with this stuff. And so parents have to be completely on top of it. We encourage folks, of course, if they can, to homeschool or Christian school, because that's where you're going to avoid all of this. Now, that is why our organization is huge on school choice, because not every parent can afford to stay home with their child to homeschool or put them in a Christian school. We have a decent low-income scholarship program now here in Virginia that we've created that actually helps some folks have access to this. But this is something where our state is really behind a lot of states in the nation in simply saying, look, we're going to put tax dollars towards education. You ought to be able to take the tax dollars that are allotted for your child and put them where they're going to thrive. And for Christian families, that's not typically the public school. And so you ought to be able to take those dollars and actually put them into a Christian school, or that allows you to stay home with your child and homeschool them. But we got a long way to go on that. But you're absolutely right. And then when you get to the college level, is your child grounded enough to be able to withstand that? And I think you make a great point, encouraging Christian college, encouraging, I hadn't really spent a lot of time thinking about, but encouraging the online, because you avoid the culture issues that come. And by culture, I mean the indoctrination issues that infiltrate
pressures.
sort of the pressures you certainly, that is one way to protect oneself from that.
Yes, because there's definitely a liberal agenda out there in the curriculum and the professors the classes that you're required to take. It's full of woke critical race theory that promotes there being oppressor races and victim races, so that we think of ourselves as oppressors and victims, and it's divisive. It's not healthy. It's not healing. It promotes racial divisions. It's heading in the wrong direction, not the right direction. And the Family Foundation promotes legislation that says you can't teach that one race is suppressing another, correct? But it's hard to get this legislation in the liberal legislature here, especially the state Senate, correct?
Yes, we are trying to work these things through our legislature right now. We have liberal control of the House and the Senate right now. And so it's a real challenge in Virginia to get something like that through. But we have had bills basically that say, look, anything that encourages an oppressor and an oppressed, any of that ideology. And it's hard to define because it seeps in such tricky ways. But we've really tried to push that. Our governor, I think, has been very strong in his statements about that, but we can't seem to get a bill to his desk yet that would officially take this stuff out of the curriculum. So he's doing what he can through standards. So, for example, at your Board of Education that governs the K-12, sort of what's supposed to be in curriculum. So he's put some good people on that, and they're trying to kind of clean that up. But it's a long-term battle, and I certainly would say, unless you're willing to engage that on a daily basis with your child and equip them in an unusually strong way, your better choices are outside of the public system if you don't want DEI and gender issues to
it's so
kind of be
discouraging for our kids, right? Because there's so much pressure, and they already have the pressure of their, hormones and just kind of growing up, and it's just so much at them. And so, of course, they're going to believe, their teachers that are teaching these crazy ideologies. It's disheartening. But I think, as Christians, we can definitely do something about it by teaching our kids, discipling our kids, and, talking to them about these Christian colleges and online schools and things like that. I get concerned, but a lot of times I have to surrender it and just give it to the Lord, say, Lord, our child belongs to you. We're going to do the best that we can to be able to teach and steward their heart and soul towards you, and hoping that, they grow up to know you and walk in righteousness. And so it's so much pressure for our kids. Definitely a lot different from when I was growing up.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, in your estimation, does Governor Youngkin have a pretty good scorecard in supporting religious and family values?
Yeah, I think overall he's been very strong. I mean, I tell people no one's perfect. And certainly when you're under that kind of pressure at that level and you've got special interests in all directions, it's a challenge. Mm-hmm. But I would say overall he's done very well, particularly I think in particular in this area of the woke culture. That seems to be something he's really passionate about and has worked to try to do what he can. He cannot do it unilaterally. That's the challenge. When you don't have a legislature, you can only do so much as the executive, as the governor of a state. And so he's kind of done what he can, and I think continues to do that. So that has been really great, because I will tell you where Virginia would be if we didn't at least have a governor that understood this concept, to be able to kind of be a backstop for a legislature that keeps handing him really pretty crazy ideas.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be a tough job. I mean, we have a liberal legislature, as you say, in Virginia, and a conservative Governor Youngkin that vetoed a bunch of liberal bills or amending them, and the amendments were rejected. Tell us about some of these.
Well, boy, they sent about 30 bills that, at a minimum, we would have liked to have seen vetoed, and most of them the governor did end up vetoing. But everything from, I'll just give you an example. We were talking about Harrison Buckner earlier. They sent a bill that was really substantively a good idea, which was dealing with maternal health and trying to get to the issues of maternal health. And they had to, just because of the ideology that's flowing through some folks, they had to remove the word pregnant women, and they replaced it with the idea of birthing people. So again, it's this idea that like women are being sort of erased out of not just sort of, like the motherhood thing that I think Harrison Buckner was trying to get at, but we're even being taken out of the code, right? We're just a birthing person. We're just and because of these gender confusions. So the governor got bills like that that he thankfully vetoed and said, look, we're not going to play those games here in Virginia. We're not interested in that type of that type of
nonsense.
Yeah, nonsense. Thank you. That's malarkey at its greatest form. So he got handed a lot of bills that, now there were some bills that were extremely harmful, also not just in sort of vocabulary, but truly the underlying intent was very harmful. We're obviously a pro-life organization, and there's really an effort underway to make Virginia the abortion capital of the South, the place that someone goes to get the late term abortion, to get an abortion because the states south of us have done a better job protecting human life. They've put in restrictions, they've put in ways to help women make better choices. And so, if you're in North Carolina or Tennessee or one of these places, they want you to come, almost, they call it tourism abortion, which is the hardest, awful word I've ever heard, but come to Virginia. And so they put in bills. Already we have more lax standards in all of those states, but they put in bills that would literally allow our pharmacists and abortion doctors to actually participate, for example, in shipping chemical abortions into states that don't allow chemical abortions. Literally the bill would say, look, they're going to participate in illegal medicine in another state, but we're not going to hold them responsible in our state. There'll be nothing happen to their medical license. And we're going to say that their governor, like if they shipped a pill into Texas, if that was illegal in Texas, we're going to literally say in Virginia that Texas's governor can't hold them responsible either in his state. We're going to shield them. We're going to protect them for having done this terrible thing. And so that's the level of aggression that we're seeing from the abortion industry in Virginia. And the governor got bills like that. And thankfully he did veto those as well. But you just think about what's trying to be done here. And we are super thankful. We have a governor that is pro-life and is pro-parent and does believe that women have a place in the motherhood process.
Yes, I think there was a bill that made contraception a right, so it allows access to everyone, to include minors.
Minors, that was
contraceptives that abort with no religious exemptions, and I guess the governor amended it, which the liberals saw as gutting it, effectively vetoing it.
Yeah. They really want to undo. We have very few restrictions on any of these kind of things anymore in Virginia, because we had several years where we just had liberals top to bottom and they changed all of our laws. But that access to contraception, folks need to understand, a lot of times when they use the word contraception, they are including in that abortifacients. So it's not exclusively contraception. And what they really wanted was for minors, that you don't have to have a conversation with your parent. You don't have to be involved. We just want these kids to be able to get access to this kind of a thing. And so that's where, again, thankfully, our governor really understands the role of a parent and has been very strong on parental rights and saying, look, a child needs a mom or a dad in that situation.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about what's a lot in the news lately about trans individuals in women's sports. What's the problem with biological men in women's sports? It feels so weird to even ask that question. I don't get it. I think our country has lost its mind.
Yeah, we have.
Certainly it starts with, yes, our country does need Jesus. And it certainly starts with God made them male and female. But, on a real level, I do want to remind, our audience that sometimes we take for granted that as believers, we are given special revelation. We're given the ability to understand scripture and know it to be true and understand the purpose behind it. And we have to understand that people that do not know Jesus, do not have the Holy Spirit, they simply, even basic truths like biology, can be muddled by the enemy. And so I just want to start with that. But then obviously, it just wreaks tremendous havoc in our society where people are confused around their gender, and then others are affirming that. And to the point where we now have biological men competing in women's sports. And it's just a shame, because we know that biologically men and women are not the same. God has given us uniqueness, and that we just absolutely are made differently. There is just more science than you can count that just kind of talks about the difference between men and women in true things that play out in sports, strength and agility and all these things that are real when you get to high level competition. And so we've had some great folks speak out against this. Riley Gaines is kind of the one that a lot of folks know, a swimmer who all of a sudden was confronted with, I now have to race a biological male who last year swam against men, and this year he's coming to take my title. And Riley and this biological male, Will Thomas, they tied. And so then the people who were running the competition literally asked Riley Gaines to not accept the prize, so because they only had one spot on the podium. I mean, literally deplatforming her win. And so she's become quite the spokeswoman about the dangers of this. And we know from psychology just how valuable sports are to girls in helping them learn to lead and helping them learn confidence. Sports play a really vital role for a lot of our young people in just kind of forming who they are. And so this idea that we're going to have men come in and kind of steal the championships, steal the scholarships, it's really concerning. And even today I saw, I had a friend post about the male individual that just won a beauty prize, the Miss America contest, it's another place where, again, we have men. So these things were intended to be separate. So there are opportunities for both genders to receive accolades, to fine tune their sport to a point where they can experience what a championship is. And in the beauty contest, it's a little different. That's not something I'm super into, but the point is just that men and women are different, and there should be different avenues for those things. And now, once again, another place where men are stepping in. And it's amazing to me because it's such a distortion of what feminism used to be. There was this long period in our history where it was all about making sure women had opportunities. And that's where Title IX was created, which is the idea just that we're going to have separate sports and that we're going to truly fund women's sports and all those things. There was really a whole amount of time where it was like, look, maybe women don't have enough opportunities. Let's make sure those opportunities are there. And now some of those same kinds of ideology people are now allowing men to come in and literally decimate what was created through those programs and the way that we kind of set things up. And so it's truly sad.
Yeah, it's like, where are they now? I guess they're okay with it.
It's interesting. I think there's a mix. I think there are some who have, in the nicest way I can say it, have swallowed the Kool-Aid and yes, have completely come on board with somehow, because it's in the world of intersectionality. This is this whole idea. And it's sort of like there are almost hierarchies of classifications. And so the trans classification has to sort of trump the women classification, if that makes sense. There's literally like layers. And so for people who are trans, we have to honor them, even if it hurts true women, if that makes sense in that way. And so I think there are people who have kind of gone on board with that. I do think there are people who are sitting back quietly who are who agree with many things around that, but see this as wrong. When you poll an issue like women's sports, 70% of Virginians absolutely do not think men should participate in women's sports. That's a higher number than we would get on other issues that are kind of conservative based issues. So it tells you there are people that are seeing this and saying that's not true. That's not right.
I
that's
think
not.
People are afraid to speak up because they're going to get canceled.
Correct.
Right? I mean, it goes back to being canceled, and you can't speak on these issues or any kind of biblical topic without being shut down, your job being taken away, or whatever.
And we're willing to just throw notions of fairness and logic just right out the window. I mean, even if they are controlling the level of their hormones through drugs, they went through male puberty, male development. Yes. And even if they stunted their male development, there's still quite a difference in lung capacity and muscle coordination and strength and endurance. Nothing you do changes that your gender at the core in every cell of your body. It's the whole reason why we have male and female sports. And now the liberal LGBT agenda is breaking down those lines because gender is not a biological thing. It's a social construct, and you can simply choose to be another gender, even in sports. We've lost our minds, as I said before.
A male can never become a female, right, and vice versa. There is just no way that can ever happen. And we really harm our young people when we act as if it can. And what so many people miss is our silence when we're quiet about these things. It is allowing the harm to continue. And when we think about these kids who are confused about their gender, which is growing in number because the whole society is confused about gender, right? So there's more and more kids confused about their gender than ever before. And we're saying, yeah, go pursue that confusion to the point where they will ultimately end up sterilizing themselves
Yes.
at a young age in some cases. And so the travesty that's around this is hard to even speak about. So yes, in some cases it's sports, and sports, you can take sports or leave sports. They're not vital to human existence. But the reality is, it's just we keep affirming that this is okay. And the affirmation of it, the allowing it to happen, is what's confusing more and more young people to the point where there is real harm.
And I just saw something yesterday with, I think it's Jillian Michaels, and she had said a quote, because she is outright a gay woman, but she said that California has lost their mind, and that would go crazy if someone tried to tell her son to pretty much sterilize himself. And so to hear that from someone who is a gay woman is a big deal.
I think we're seeing some backlash. I think we are. And we're seeing some other countries really banning the gender affirmation surgeries and so forth at young ages. Many of the European countries that started this, even really before the States, or before it was comfortable in the States that we were doing it, they're backtracking and saying, oh, we're finding out this is not so good. And so now we need to get our country in its entirety to backtrack on this and say, wow, this is really, really harmful.
Yeah, and you have people speaking out like Riley Gaines, the competitive swimmer, and Bethany Hamilton, the surfer that lost her arm in a shark attack, that speaks out against having to compete against biological males in surfing competitions. She's speaking at your annual gala in September, right?
Yeah, we are so excited to have Bethany Hamilton. I mean, a lot of people have just looked up to her because of the struggle that she went through and just overcoming. We talk about the true athlete, to be able to say, I'm still going to surf without an arm. I mean, some of us can't even wrap our heads around that. So we've always respected her. And then she's been such a strong believer, talking about how your faith plays into that kind of perseverance. And then now, I mean, she's had men enter surfing competitions, right? So this is the reality, is that the Surfing Association has now said that a biological male, she still surfs, she still competes. And so now she's thinking about this in terms of her own sport, but also she has a daughter. So it's just, we're excited to have her September 28th, I guess it is, on our big event. And we just can't wait till she shares just her perspective and her heart on all of that.
Yeah, and it comes at a cost. I mean, people are standing up at a cost. I mean, I believe Rip Curl dropped her as a sponsor. And you mentioned about Title IX. The federal government is rewriting Title IX, are they not? If a school gets federal funding, sports can't discriminate against transgender, or you will lose funding, I believe is what have they done that, or are they in the works of doing that?
Yeah, so the Biden administration has reinterpreted an old rule, and yes, they are trying to say basically that sex now means gender, right? So that it means your gender identity, so how you feel about yourself. And so yes, it's going to have huge impact. It is interesting because they are in an election season, and so it's interesting to watch these things happen. So they want to move the agenda forward, but they don't really want to talk about it a whole lot yet, because they want to make sure he gets reelected, because this is not a popular idea across the board. And so so even though it is starting to have its tentacles, our school boards are having to grapple with it right now. What does that mean? They go back to school, August, September, and they have to decide, does that impact the kinds of policies that we have at our school? So literally school boards are starting to grapple with it. Our law center is having to give advice to all these school boards, because we do have the model guidelines that Governor Youngkin has put forward that says, look, you don't have to have boys and girls bathrooms. You need to have parental involvement, all these things. And then the Biden administration comes in, reinterprets this rule. So there's kind of like a state federal clash going on here. And our school boards are kind of caught in the midst. There are instant lawsuits against the Biden administration. So the question is, will it be hung up in court and not implemented, or will it be implemented and we'll have to wait for court to undo it? So these are the crazy, I mean, this is the world that we live in. It's like back and forth on these policies, but it's disappointing that our president and his government would try to come in and stand over top of states and tell states what to do. And Florida, for example, is just not having it. I mean, they just absolutely, the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, has basically said, we're not following what you're doing. And so there's an interesting states' rights thing going on here that these social issues have really put forward.
Yeah, and we just love states like Florida and Ron DeSantis, and we love you and your organization that are just holding the line there. There just seems to be a huge cultural divide in America that seems to be growing wider and wider between liberals and conservatives, blue states and red states, biblical worldview and worldly worldview, those that promote LGBT, abortion, gambling, woke policies, racial divisiveness, anti-Israel, and everything that goes against the Bible, and then those that promote biblical values and follow the Bible by supporting Israel and the family and biblical values. The evil forces in this world are just trying to take over. It's people like you and the Family Foundation that are defending biblical values. We just thank you for being a champion for all that is right and biblical.
Yeah, Victoria, I mean, it's just been an amazing conversation today to be able to talk about all these topics, because it's important for us to know, like, even as Virginians, like, we want to be able to stand. I want to stand for the right of my child, and I want to stand for biblical truth at all times, because, am I here to please God, or am I here to please man? I mean, Galatians 1:10 is huge on that. And I want to please God. And yes, there are sometimes I think we could be fearful as citizens, but I think if we truly put our heart and mind looking at God's word, looking at his promises, then we can see that God is for us and he's not against us. And so we have great advocates like you and different people, and we're just so proud of you. I mean, all the things that you're doing and just defending life, defending families. And it's so encouraging to me to hear all the things that you're doing for the state. And, I pray that the Lord would just expand it and continue to protect your organization and protect you as you're out there on that front line, Victoria. So as we end this podcast, Victoria, can you please tell our audience how we can get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest is just to go to our website at familyfoundation.org, and you can find out about the Law Center. You can find out about your local grassroots group, what are people doing in my community, or about our issues. So definitely just the website's probably the easiest, familyfoundation.org. They can check out our podcast. It's Speak Up Virginia, and you can get that, just like your podcast on YouTube or Spotify or Apple or whatever. And that's a great way to just kind of start learning about the issues if somebody hasn't really tracked all this specifically here in Virginia too.
Yeah, I'll definitely include that in our notes. So Victoria, thank you so much for being here today and teaching us about all these amazing things that we need to know, and as citizens of Virginia, and just even outside of Virginia, people that need to know how to get in touch with their family foundation within their states. So thank you so much, Victoria, for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Wow, that was a great interview with Victoria Cobb, the president of the Family Foundation, defending families. I mean, she talked about so many topics and just really went deep with them. And it's really encouraging, because it challenges me to stand up in different areas that are really being attacked, especially with our children being attacked and having all these pressures and gender ideologies and the woke culture and all these things. I mean, these were great topics.
Yes, and she's just doing so much, and we only touched on a small smattering of what we wanted to talk about, because there's just so much. There was no way to get through it all. And we just encourage everybody to visit their website and look at their podcasts and just really be informed of all the social issues that are going on in this nation. And her organization also looks at the national level, because that affects us at the state level. So certainly if you're in Virginia, make sure you're following the Family Foundation and their podcast and their website, and just be informed of what's going on in your local government. But even if you're not from Virginia, you can follow them as well, because they address national issues as well, and all the issues that we need to be informed of as believers in order to stand up for biblical truth and not just kowtow and let the liberal woke factions of this nation just run right overshot us as we just sit there and stand by and do nothing. We need to speak up. We need to support those who are speaking up, and we need to do our part.
Yeah, and we need to know all this information to be able to vote, because as Christians, we are called to vote. We need to vote for the best candidate that will represent our Christian values, and no one's perfect, and there's not going to be one candidate that is absolutely perfect and following the Bible, but someone who really values those things that are more aligned to what we believe in the Bible. And so I think it's really important for us to just have that education and learning about our states and learning about the topics and learning about the things that are being passed, the bills that are going through in our states. And that helps us to stand up for our families and for our children and for our future generations. So
we got to vote. We got to vote.
Yeah.
I mean, most importantly, if you just do that, just get out and vote as Bible-believing Christians.
Yes.
Make sure you on any voting day are out there voting, and you're voting for people, the best candidate that might not be the most perfect candidate, but the best candidate that supports biblical values and supports the family and just follows the Bible, is at least putting policies in there that go in the right direction with the Bible. Be informed enough to know and vote. Got to get there and vote.
Yes, I agree. And that's definitely what we have to do this coming November. Every November, vote. And so we were so happy that we were able to talk with Victoria Cobb and her foundation. And she's got that gala coming with Bethany Hamilton. That's so exciting. And just seeing these different people just standing up for their faith. And that's what we need to do. So we encourage you to stand up for biblical truth. We have a podcast that comes out every Tuesday where we talk about marriage and family. And we just ask that you please share this with someone that may be interested and just subscribe. It really helps us. So thank you so much for being here. Until next time.
God bless.